Okay. Oh no, not right now. Welcome, good evening. We're gonna let folks continue to join here for another minute before we get started. Settle in, grab some water, some tea. If you're East Coast like us, late, not coffee time anymore. We'll be starting very soon. As you're joining, we would love for folks to add their name and what state they're coming from. And if you're feeling it, let us know what brought you into this conversation today. Oh, Florida! My Florida folks, you got 2 Florida people here today. Oh, look at all these beautiful places. New Jersey, Ohio, New Hampshire, Minnesota. Amazing. Keep sharing. I'm going to go ahead and get us started as folks continue to share in the chat. Well, welcome. We're so glad to see everyone here tonight, and wonderful to see some new faces. There's some names that I know are new in the chat. Tonight, we're going to have a great conversation on parenting amid political turmoil. As parents and caregivers, we often have more questions than answers when it comes to the beauty of parenting our kids, but little prepares us for parenting amid political turmoil that we're experiencing right now. There's no handbook, but maybe together we can start somewhere. We'll have an honest conversation about how to talk with children of all ages about the political divide and fear in our communities, and what we can do together to build a brighter future for our kids, right? Even when, for some of us, it can feel insurmountable in the moment. And continue, please, to keep sharing as you join, keep sharing where you're coming from, what brought you here, so that we all get to know who's in the space. But first, some logistics. This call is webinar style due to the high volume of RSVPs. So please use that chat function vigorously and to connect with each other. We are recording this session, but we will only be sending it to the folks who could not make it, who RSVP'd for the event. So please stay with us for the evening so that you can really get the richness of the conversation and get your own personal questions answered, which I'll get to here in a minute. The Moms Next Door is something that first I want to go through with everybody before we keep moving. We're going to do a quick recap on what Moms Next Door is, just in case there's some new folks in the room, which I know we already have a couple. Moms Next Door is an opportunity to get equipped, skilled up, and fired up to lead in communities that you all together get to shape. Members who sign up receive monthly e-newsletters that include the invitation to the monthly virtual workshops like this one, and a toolkit full of opportunities to unlock in plain sight everyday ways to connect and lead for change through political acts of service. What does that mean in real terms? We are here to be an information and training hub as you think about if and how you want to build and or support community-driven political work. This work is bigger than any one of us, but if we all take a small part, our impact will be unstoppable. We are curating the tools and helping spark ideas, so you are in the driver's seat, while we keep you updated on the latest happenings in the world and still providing action opportunities and tools to do your own community organizing, including a platform called the Moms Rising organizing platform that enables you to build local meetings, actions, have social conversations outside of Facebook, and more. You will also get the monthly Moms Next Door dispatch, which you should have already gotten before one of these meetings. So if you ended up finding us on Mobilize and you've never seen one of our dispatches, check out the links in the chat, sign up to get them. They're really usually tied around the calls that we're having, and we try to keep them timely. So it's a great resource with actions and suggested readings and a lot more. We also have office hours, which we would love to have people utilize a lot more. We know some folks are interested in more one-on-one time with our team to discuss ideas of how to get involved locally. And now you have that chance. To get information on these office hours and other activities, make sure you join the online community page, which you'll see the link in the chat. Now, I'm really excited to get started on the meat of the program tonight. We are so lucky to be joined by a brilliant guest tonight and a dear friend and someone that I just love so dearly, Lina Acosta Sandaal. Lina has an MA and LMFT, is a consultant in social emotional learning, a developmental expert, a speaker, and an author. She has trained and participated in research studies with Yale's Minding the Baby, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, and the Child Trauma Research Program. She is the head of a school at KLA Academy, an independent school serving infants through 5th grade. Lina also founded Stop Parenting Alone, a parent education and consulting platform supporting families and schools. She appears regularly as the parenting and human development expert at Telemundo's national morning show and is the author of Macmillan Education's Learning Well series on social emotional development. Lina's mission is to help adults fall in love with guiding children. Welcome, Lina. And Lina, I'd love to give you a minute to just add anything to that you'd like to add.
All I will add is that I've done all of that, but my most important role is that of being a parent to my 17 and my 20-year-old. So my little social emotional experiment thus far has been successful.
I can attest to the fact that Lina has very well adjusted and awesome children. So, well, first of all, I want folks to know that we want to hear questions from you. And so if you don't know how to use the Q&A feature in Zoom, you can see the little box that says Q&A. We will be looking at the questions. We ask that people use the Q&A function specifically because we want to be able to track them, and it's a little easier to track there than in the chat. But if you do drop one in the chat, we have our team who's trying to track your questions in the chat as well to make sure that we get to as many of your questions as possible. But I have to admit, I really struggled with how to start this session tonight because since January, I have talked to so many parents online at events, at school drop-off, even just at the grocery store one day, really recently, actually, about parenting amid these unprecedented times, right? It's what I've been describing as how do I talk about this question? How do I talk to my child about ICE raids? How do I talk to my child about why I don't want them to go to protests with me anymore? How do I talk to my kid about why their public school is closing? And so the how do I's have been piling up. And lots of times I think as parents, we're really dancing in the dark, trying to figure out how to handle these how do I moments. And I actually don't think we will get to all or even most of the answers tonight, but at least we can start somewhere together so that we're not all dancing in the dark alone. And maybe if we're having these conversations, we can have conversations with parents even outside of this space that we're in here tonight. And we can all get closer to some of these answers of how to best support our families and ourselves through these conversations. For this session, I've pre-developed some questions based on our conversations with families, but again, we really want the star of this show to be all of you who are here. And so again, I'm going to ask that in real time, you put your questions in the Q&A function. You can start now. Like if you just came to the session, you're like, this is the thing I want to know about, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. The only thing we ask is that you keep your questions focused on parenting specifically, tough conversations, differences for handling topics across ages, regulating your own emotions, how to help kids cope with changing realities, and so on. Things specifically related to that process of parenting. And while folks are thinking about questions or dropping their own questions, I'm going to go ahead and just get us started. So, Lina, I feel like I'm starting you off on a really hard one. I just want to name that.
They're never easy.
That feels right. I feel like there's no parenting question or conversation with kids that's ever going to be easy. So I feel like that's probably right. So I'm going to start us with a really hard one, which was ICE raids, because it's one that I get a question about the most, and something that I think folks here may not know, actually, that Lina has done some version of this conversation with Moms Rising folks so many times, but specifically from a framework of family separation and the impact of family separation on communities. So I encourage you, you can find that on our YouTube channel, some of those conversations, and I'm sure Lina will touch on some of that tonight as well. But one of the things that we're seeing now is that a sanctuary status of churches and schools and childcare centers and more have been disbanded. Is that the circle of children that are not just experiencing ICE raids, but witnessing them as well has expanded considerably. So I want to ask you almost a cascade of questions. I couldn't figure out a way to do this that wasn't like a cascade of questions here that will hopefully touch on some of the different points of impact that folks are really trying to address with their kids. And where you can talk about the differences across age and development, as always, is brilliant and amazing. And Fern, I see your hand raised. I'm going to ask that you use the Q&A function for now, and that we pause, and we will have opportunity to get to more of those questions. But I'm going to ask folks right now to use the Q&A queue for now. Thank you so much. I want to start first with, how do parents talk to their kids about the potential of an ICE raid impacting their own family directly, or the fear that it'll impact their family directly based on their family's ethnicity? You know, for example, we have several families telling us that they have stopped speaking their home language in public, even when they are US citizens, because they're afraid that they'll be targeted based on their language use or race alone. This fear feels amplified in some ways by a recent Supreme Court case that loosened the guardrails against racial profiling in ICE raids. And I think kids really notice the shift, and inevitably the questions come, right? All of a sudden, mom used to speak to me in Spanish or Mandarin in public, and now she doesn't anymore, right? Or they don't anymore. How would you guide folks on the response here and how to navigate that?
So for children between 4 and 10, so those children pre-K 4 all the way to 5th grade, you always want to have when a professional tells you that it needs to be age appropriate, what that means is that you have to bring the information down to what they're exposed to, right? And what a lot of children are exposed to are rules and expectations at school, right? And having to follow, and they themselves also have rules and expectations that they follow in a school that they themselves may not agree with and or like, right? So for me, to keep it age appropriate, it's a conversation about the truth, right? With that, some of the rules have changed, right, in for the adults and the bigger picture, right? So this example of we are choosing not to speak Spanish or Mandarin or Portuguese outside of our home, it can be framed in, there are new rules now that make it so we will speak our language at home, but we won't speak that language outside of our home. Now it's up to the parent if they want to add the flavor of, and that keeps us safe, right? Because I don't want anybody to feel like you're adding anxiety or hurting your children. If you tell them about safety, you've told them about safety about multiple things. You've told them how to be safe at the park. You've told them how to be safe to cross the street. So just adding this extra aspect of like, for us to be safe as a family, this is what we're going to do. Now, inevitably, somebody 5, 6, 7, 8 is going to ask, but why? Why did this happen? Right? And that's the part where all of you get stuck like deer in headlights, because if you responded honestly, some of you would be like, because people are awful, or you go there in your head, right? And all of us, all of us attempt to present in our best selves to our children. So in that one, it's also about it's also answering them in again in the best level of ourselves, into saying some people believed that this was a better way. Mommy and daddy don't, we as your parents don't necessarily believe that. And then so you could say Some people believe that this would be better because that's true, right? But then you immediately can go into your own values, right? And your own beliefs. But you also have to give them the hard truth that in a world where different people's opinions and voices get voted on or get changed, this is what happened now, but this is what we believe as a family. Right now, for the family that is in fear of the possibility of losing a member of the family if there is a raid, right? It is important to do two things. In the moment, please just sit in the dark with your children. And this comes out of my mouth, but I know how difficult that feels, right? It is perfectly okay to put your arm around your child, to kiss them on the head, and just say, "This is hard," and cry. Both of you together, right? That moment of connection, that moment of love, that moment of we are here. Like, you don't have to have all the answers, you don't have to be the savior, but you do have to be that nervous system that they need, and for the two of you to just hold one another, right? um what most of us are feeling, both in our day-to-day in our homes and also in a big macro level, is it's grief and uncertainty, right? And the most loving thing that we can do with grief and uncertainty with one another is just to hold the weight of that. Now, it is important to have a plan of action in case of, right? So it most definitely have a plan at school with the people at your school in case you don't come to school. Please find someone that will be coming to get the children. It is important to let your children know that if your best friend Susan comes to pick them up, that is the right person, right? And perhaps you would like have some sort of something that Susan has. I'm just making up a person's name, that when they go pick up your child is aware, and then kind of have a plan of action that this is your safe person. Kind of like, I always used to tell parents, when your child gets lost in the store, tell them to go to the cash register. It's actually the safest place. It's much harder to go find the security guard. Cash register, somebody's there, they're behind the desk, they can call someone. It's that piece. So there should be a plan, and the adults like that see your children often should have that information. And if they're little, you show a picture. If they're big, you tell them the story. Now with the adolescents, anybody that has children 10 and older, yes, 10 and older, because a lot of you guys have 10-year-olds and you think they're babies, and they're not. They're fully aware of what is happening. They're fully aware of what is happening. They can read, they're resourceful. If some of them are on social media, they know. So it is important to just have frank conversations with them, same wrap around, same conversation, but also that plan of action. There is no need to bubble wrap our children at this point, right? We don't protect children from life. We build skills and give them opportunities to manage hardship, right? And that's I it's we don't want that, but that's where we are right now. So it's kind of like the acceptance of the uncertainty and the acceptance of the grief and the sadness.
Not even how many minutes in, and I'm already like, oh God, I'm gonna cry. Okay. So, and thank you for submitting questions. I see them, and we're gonna get to some of your questions next. I want to finish on this, like my ice cascade here first though. And I feel like you've kind of touched on this a little bit, Lina, and I feel like some of your responses here are probably gonna be similar, but you know, I wonder if there's, so one of the things I'd love you to touch on is what happens if someone witnesses an ICE raid in a community. I think this is akin to this fear that many of us have as parents that our child will just witness violence at some point, right? Like witness a school shooting or witness some kind of violence. And so, or even just at the level of, I have already had my child who goes to a dual language program with migrant children come home and say, this friend is no longer in school. Why? And we know that there was like a raid, right? And so how do we kind of tackle those situations in a way that feels supported to the point that you're saying, but without saying like, oh, it was nothing.
Right. So you're gonna hear me say this throughout the night. Like, don't, the answer is never everything's fine, because none of you are Meryl Streep and you can't pretend. You're not that good of an actress, right? So don't do that. However, um, I want to say something just because I don't, you didn't ask it, but I think people think it, right? Um, Seeing the violence, having that scary moment, having that, seeing something that you wouldn't want your child to see, that in itself alone is does not traumatize. Okay? I want everybody to understand this. That does not traumatize a child, right? It's a scary moment that will have repetitive flashbacks, right? But what all of us need when we see something like that is another person to talk it out. What really traumatizes people is having that moment and then being alone with it,
Mm.
right? Not having anywhere to displace it, not having anywhere to speak about it, not having anywhere. It's like, like right now, like you were asking me before about, being head of school and having this new position. It's like I really had to think through. I have to have a lockdown, drill. And, here I am, the mental health professional who's also head of school. It's like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Because, hello, every time there was a lockdown drill, when I used to have a psychotherapy agency, I got a couple of kids, to come to treatment, right? So the task at hand is to, again, have the short child, age appropriate conversation about people made these new rules. Our family doesn't agree with them, but this is what we have to do now as a family. And also predict, in your school, there are some students that may not return. And, and in case there's anything that, seems scary, you could come home and talk to me about it. Right. So first we predict, right? Number two, if it happens, something as simple as telling your child, of course that was scary. Of course that's sad that your friend isn't there anymore. Of course, like just like telling someone else, I see you, I understand you. You're not crazy that you're feeling this way. That's halfway. And then when a child sees something that is confusing or scary or overwhelming, they may dream about it, they may wake up about it, they may want to talk about it, right? So, please allow them to, because it's the talking it out that's best. And when a child asks you a question, especially in this time where you don't have an answer, it is perfectly okay to say, you know what, buddy, I don't have an answer for that. and I'm gonna see, and if you can, you could say, and we're gonna seek the answer together. Or at this moment there isn't an answer, and I know how horrible that feels. It feels yucky for me too. Or if it's like a policy question that is like smart, that they're like, because a lot of kids come up with like these policy, like, but why don't they, they'll probably come up with some wonderful immigration solution in front of your face. I want you to say to them, buddy, that is a really good idea. And there are adults that are thinking this through and thinking it through like you, right? I love saying that to children, right? Letting them know that they're like, This always comes up when children like kind of bump up against death. By the way, most 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds, all of a sudden they're like they realize that there's death and things die. So they ask you the hard death questions. And I love telling them, look, there is a whole arm of something called philosophy, and they talk about death, and they've been studying it, and it's in big universities. And then little kids are like, really? Because they bump up against the hard questions. So it's back to like allowing your child to speak to you, being as honest and as frank as possible with your child, but always bringing them back to your values, and being real with them. Like, but I think that's what adults are afraid of, right? Because again, your
Right.
real right now is painful. Your real right now, I'm sure on a good day you're hopeful, but on a bad day you're hopeless. And sharing that hopelessness with your baby doesn't seem fair or right. Um, so when on the days when you are feeling hopeless, on the days when you're just mad, those are the days to just snuggle up, to give them a kiss in the forehead and just hold them. And tell them, let's bake some cookies. Like, and that's not distraction, because distraction is let's not talk about it, right? But being together and baking some cookies and both agreeing that this is hard, it's okay.
I love that. Let me go back to something that you said, Lina, really quick. All right. I think one of the things that folks are struggling with, you said anticipate, right? Like predict for that notion of predicting.
Hmm.
What are the kind of benefits or drawbacks to predicting the possibility for children, right? Because an ice raid may never happen in their school,
Right.
but it might. What
I
would
think
you
we have to predict when we're pretty sure that they may see something. If we imagine that it's kind of like far from us, then we don't have to. Then we just respond. But if you are in a school district where it's going to get touched, but then it is important to predict. Um, but you know more than me, right? Like where you are, what school you're in, what activities your children have. Um, if not, then it's okay to respond. And
think?
again, like I said, it's scary and uncomfortable if something like that happens, but it's not traumatizing. I think that's what most parents worry. My child is going to be traumatized because they saw the guy come and take their teacher. Like, well, I know that a lot of you guys are imagining worst case scenario. And by the way, that's perfectly normal. So,
Last question in this series of questions, and then we're going to take one of the questions from the queue from the audience. Is you talked a little bit about those tweens and those teens, and I will try to remember the 10-year-old piece and absorb that into my brain. My brain says no, but I'm going to try. Uh, I've talked to a couple of parents who are really struck by how much their children are hearing. To your point, like they're hearing it outside of the home, like what's
yeah.
happening, and it is such already a hard thing to talk about even among adults, right? Like how did we get here? Why is this happening? Like is there almost like a not telling people what to say, but like is there a blueprint almost of like what are the things that could be in that conversation, right? That would deepen like that would allow folks to like have a kind of pathway to figuring out how to have those conversations without their kiddos feeling entirely powerless, because I think in particular for youth it's so easy for them to feel powerless because they are not adults, right? And the world around them is being run predominantly by adults and people that are making decisions on their behalf, right? And
Mhm.
so I've been sitting with that a lot, and I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, so again, children 10 and older, fifth grade and older, they've heard something. So something as simple as in the car, the car confessional. I don't know, those of you guys that have 10, 11, 12, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, they talk more to you when you're in the car and everybody's looking forward. Um, or you're walking somewhere together, like whenever you're doing something else, the conversation seems easier. Um, Questions are your friends. Hey, Bobby, what have you heard about the raids? Nothing. Oh, I was just curious. Well, what do you think about it? Right? I don't know, Mom. What are you talking about? Right? I know all of you guys that have the 10, 11, or 12-year-old when they're like, I don't know, you can tell that they do know, but they're like not wanting to have the conversation. Trust your gut. If they tell you, I don't know, and then they're like, go about their business and you know that they don't know, leave it there. Right? But if you can tell that they are just going, huh, like, because they don't have the conversation, just like the sex talk. You could be like, well, this is what I think. um and just give them the two line, and when you tell your children what you think about these types of topics, make sure that you add your value. As a family, we believe in fill in the value, right? We believe in integrity, or we believe in patience, or we believe in kindness. And these new rules make it really difficult for us to kind of accept what's going on around us, right? And then wait. A lot of adults don't wait the 6 seconds that you have to wait for a child to respond to you. And 6 seconds feels like this. So the next time you ask your kiddo a question, right, whether actually any age, but in particular the teenagers and the tweens, what have you heard about the raids? They're going to look at you. There's going to be that moment. Give space. So I would say the the script is that talk less, ask more. Um, Popular culture, music, I mean, even like Bad Bunny deciding not to come to the United States to do his tour, right? That is a great way in to have a conversation, right? About like, okay, he made this decision. What do you think about that? So start with something that's popular culture, or maybe they're watching a show, and like that's how we talk about them. But ask them, because if they especially if you live like in an urban city, right? If you're in any of the big cities, they know. They've heard about it. They heard about Charlie Kirk. Stop lying to yourself. So ask, what do you know? And what do you think?
I love
And
that.
then that powerlessness, I am talking to a group of people that are advocates. I'm talking to a group of people that I you probably have good and bad days. You know how to talk to your children about what they can and can't control. And give them an opportunity to like ask them, what would you like to do? Would you like to write a letter? Would you like to be in a meeting? Would you like to go tomorrow to, the food bank and drop off some food? Like, I, I, I'm not talking to a group of people that doesn't know how to do this. And that's how you don't feel powerless. Like when you
Right.
go and do the thing, like dropping off food at your local food bank is good, even if it's not directly related to the rates.
Right, but could be related to any other.
Correct.
We have a multitude of things happening in our country. I'm
Correct.
going to go ahead and take two questions from the Q&A. Great job, folks. We have some great questions in here, and feel free to keep submitting them. We're here for a bit. We're going to be going back and forth between the questions that we prepared from folks ahead of time and into your questions. I'm going to ask you two questions, Lina, that I think are kind of on the same train of what we've been talking about. So this one is from Julie. There was a mass shooting in my town Sunday, which I believe was Michigan. Though sadly there were multiple. How much information is too much information to share? What should the conversation focus on when there's 1,000 opinions floating around at the same time?
Ask them what they know. Hey, what did you hear about, so always ask your child first, hey, what have you heard? Because that gives you the next step. I don't know. I just heard that somebody like hurt a bunch of people and like we shouldn't have guns, right, mom? Like, okay, now you know where to go. Yes. And then what do you share about the information? Your family's values and your family's beliefs, right? Yours. Like stay out of the external and stay within the context of the two of you.
Beautiful. And Julie, if you're still here, feel free to like add to that question if you wanted more there. Thank you so much, Lina. We have Kara. Kara said, what age should you start talking to your kids about this? I'm going to assume since we've been talking about ICE that it's about the ICE raids. My oldest is 4 and we haven't explored these topics too much yet. I'm curious, when is the best time to explore this topic? And would love, Lina, if you just extend that also to like, when do you want to first broach a kind of hard conversation with your kiddos, depending on that younger age period? Because maybe it's not about ICE, maybe it's about school shootings, maybe it's about other things, right? Like,
I don't know that I would necessarily bring these conversations up to children in preschool if it hasn't directly like entered their world. Um, I think that they're eh, without the context of like seeing or experiencing something, like I think for some of you, uh, uh like what you were sharing, Nina, of like a student being at school but they're no longer at school, but you know why, it's appropriate to say, some, there are some new rules, and your friend had to go back to where his parents were from, and mommy doesn't like that rule. And then keep it short and sweet. Would you like to write them a letter? Would you like to, and then getting into solution. I think with the littles, it's about telling them shortly, this is the rule and this is what happened. But if they haven't necessarily heard about the shooting, I don't necessarily believe that it's necessary to have a conversation with somebody in preschool. They're very, very young. They're already going to be asking you about death, so you might as well just tackle that one, uh, rather than adding to this. I think that the elementary kids, they hear it from the other kids that maybe they have more exposure to news, or unfortunately, my biggest pet peeve in the world is when the news is in the background in a restaurant, in a family restaurant. Like, there's no point to that. Like, why do you have that? So sometimes kids just, especially the ones that can read, like will
right.
read, right?
That's my child. She'll immediately be like, what is that about? Why are they talking about war?
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so like when my children were young and they started reading, I would walk into the whatever pizza place and be like, "Can you please turn that to a sports event, or just turn it off, or sit me somewhere where my children can't see that?" Like so be mindful of what you're playing in the background,
Mhm.
because if you're playing that in the background, you're they're they can hear it. So I think I answered the question. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Lina. Um, I'm gonna go into, I want to do one more given the time that we have, and I'm gonna kind of stay on the same track. I see some of your other questions here. I'm not losing them. I'll be asking them. That I'm trying to stay on this train since we're here. The I feel like you've already touched a little bit on this, Lina. How do you talk to your kids about guns, school shootings, and code red drills? Do you feel like you want to elaborate on that a little bit more? I feel like you've answered it a little bit in the session we just had.
Again, your lockdown drills, okay, with the guns, just ask what do they know, and then tell them your family values and your beliefs. With the lockdown drill at school, it is important to explain to them that their heart's going to beat really, really fast and they're going to feel scared, but it is important to practice safety, right? So give them the message that that lockdown drill, although their hearts beat really, really fast and they're breathing really, really loud, and it's kind of awful to imagine that something can hurt them, it is also important at the same time to practice, so to practice how to stay safe, just like they've practiced swimming, or they've practiced, just include it to something that's hard that we practice, just like we practice math, just like we practice our spelling, included with that. But do let them know that it's perfectly okay if if their hearts were beating really, really fast, and that, that's normal, because their body is getting ready to protect them, right? To keep them safe. And then it is perfectly normal for your child to have nightmares or questions or thinking about, something bad is going to happen after a lockdown drill at school. It's That's just a natural human response. I think there's actually two books that I chose to for my teachers to read to our students at my school, and I'll make sure to share that um with you guys so you can share it with the community.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, keep submitting your questions, folks. You're submitting wonderfully complex, beautiful questions. I'm excited. I don't know that excited is the right word, but I'm eager to get to some of the answers, some of these conversations. But I'm going to dip back into some of the questions that we've been getting from the community prior to this meeting. And this one goes out to all of our folks in our red states, especially. Though I think this is something that will be impacting many of us in different ways. One of the things that we're seeing across states like Florida, our state, Lina, and Ohio are changes in curriculum and continued attacks on our public schools. There are so many parents that I'm talking to who are really committed to public schools, but under this climate are feeling concerned about what kind of curriculum their children are being exposed to. For example, PragerU materials, which if folks have not heard of PragerU yet, it's a nice scary corner of the internet where it's making claims, for example, that slavery was normal, things like that. I know this is one that I'll just name I've personally been struggling with. I've opted out of PragerU. I've done all kinds of things. But I really don't want to be prescriptive. And I know that other parents I've talked to don't want to have a prescriptive approach about the way that we have the conversation with our children, right? And unintentionally create distrust for their teachers, right?
Correct.
Which is like this real, I think, tension point there that's hard. Who may just have to follow state standards, right? Like they may be legally required to follow these standards, but also want to make sure that I set my child up, right? Or get
Yeah.
fired, right? And then you lose out on a great teacher.
Correct.
Um, but I also want to make sure that I've set my child up right, and that like we set up our kids to ask great questions, right, in class, or to make sure that she's not taken in by what feels like is very scary propaganda in some ways, right? So what would you say to parents struggling with this tension?
For a very, very long time, at least until your child is in sixth grade, you are the primary source of information for your children. I want everybody to think about the last time you were with one of your parents and their mood affected you, and you are grown up. You're 30, you're 40, you're 25, maybe there's young people here, right? And you were in the same set, in the same space with your parent, and their mood or something they said just got in your head, and it was like bleep, 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 just rolling in there, and you thought about it for 3 days, right? And you're a grown up.
Yeah.
Well, for children, this is the scariest thing and the greatest thing, right? Because your words, your information, what you expose them to is everything to them. So even if they're reading material at school about, oh yes, there was the slave that lived with, Mr. Johns, and they worked together on the cotton fields, and you can then also at home read a book that is more congruent to how you wish for your child to learn about that part of history, right? Like, um, I'm gonna give myself some props, but like I did a tour of the South with my children. I took them to Sama, right? I showed them the bridge. We spoke about it, and when it was the right time, right? One was 10, the other one was 13, right? And because I knew that they weren't, and by the way, they were in a fancy pants private prep school in the city of Miami, but I knew that they weren't getting what me and their father wanted them to know about. I didn't have to throw the school under the bus. I was just adding to. So I don't want anybody to feel that your hands are tied. You can read books with them. You could take them to museums. You can share your own stories, right? Because your children are listening, right? So it's about an add-on. That thing that they said to you at school, you don't necessarily have to say that. You're like, okay, that's really interesting that they shared that story, but let me read this book to you. Or, oh, that's really interesting. What did you think about that when they shared that? Well, I didn't think it was fair that this person was, just like working for nothing. Like again, like you're going to hear this a lot from me. Like, ask your children questions. But I want everybody to know that you can go to the public school, but you just have to add the frosting and the cherry on top of the information that they're attaining. And you are very important. You are very important. And you're still important when they're 14, 16, 17, 20, right? It's just that at that time you're important, but there's other people in the mix, their friends, the environment, popular culture.
I love that. The and there's no, so you said up until the age until sixth grade,
Mm-hmm.
where the biggest information source.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot control the other information sources after that. I feel like that's what you're gonna say. I just wanted to like,
Well, I mean, after that, it's appropriate for a 12-year-old to say, what was I taught? And to say, who am I? Who do I want to be? And do I believe everything that I've been told? Right? And I want them to do that because that's what they need to do from 12 to 18, or from 12 to 24 to really launch into adulthood. Like we're supposed to, like, I don't like some people are 24 and that's the first time they ask themselves, who am I? Who do I wish to be? And that's a little late, right? Because, maybe they got a bachelor's degree in something ridiculous when they really didn't want to do that, but if they would have started asking themselves, who am I? Who do I want to be? And do I really believe everything that I've been told at 12, then they wouldn't have wasted 4 years in college.
I love that. Okay, well, I'm gonna go back to some questions from our beautiful audience. I want to go, and this kind of, I'm gonna try to keep it on like these themes, right? Like if I see themes and try to get as many of your questions as possible because we have a nice robust set of questions here. But Michelle, I hope I'm saying your name right. The asked, how can I get my autistic child to understand the misinformation being spread about being autistic?
Depends on how old the child is. Um, so, um, it's if they're younger, again, it depends on whether they are minimal needs or are a high need autistic person. There's so many variables on this, but if we're talking about, low need, level one, autistic, most neurodivergent autistic people need concrete language and concrete information, right? So you can say with an autistic person, you can actually say what they are sharing is not actually what the research and the science tells us. It is one aspect of the science that continues to be debunked. But let's talk about, like, again, get the information that they're getting. Um, so it's important to get a hold on what they're getting. If Don't assume that it's affecting them. I think that especially autistic teenagers or autistic adults, they actually do a better job than us neurotypical people of like not taking things personal. They're probably if they be mindful. I know that if you're a parent of an autistic person, you know that that amazing frankness that that's something that I really love about being around an autistic person. They're frank, to the point, and sometimes us that are more neurotypical and more emotional don't believe when they say it's fine, it's stupid, and then they move on, right? Like trust, right? Like try not to impose what you are feeling and yours onto them. Now, if it is upsetting to your autistic child, if it does feel like because the messaging right now for in around autism is that it's a problem, that they're wrong, that they're broken, right? So it's important to um tell them what you think about that messaging, but then wonder with them. Um, but then a child, an autistic person that is more high needs, and less verbal and less communicative, um, I would be mindful of the people that are supporting you. They're who the behavioralists, your therapist, the doctors. I would be mindful of like what do they believe, what are they thinking, have they changed their stance? Does their stance match yours? I think that's really important right now for all of you that are attaining services. This is going to be a hard time because insurance is going to, you know, perhaps take advantage of this. So it is time to kind of like, again, I love that I'm talking to a group of people that are part of the Moms Rising community, because this is one piece that this thing is going to get messy. But be mindful of who's supporting you, who you're working with, and it's important to be around service people and therapists that are on the same page with you.
And Lena, we had two people that were building on this. Like this a version of this question was actually asked multiple times, but several of the folks had kids within the range of like 6 to 10. Do you have any additional points you want to give for folks trying to have the conversations with that?
With the younger ones, I think with the younger ones is checking in on whether or not they're feeling the message. If the messaging is kind of tapping into, does it make you feel like you're broken, does it make you feel like you're wrong? Um and they may say yes, right? And like, it's, if your autistic child is going to um a neurotypical school with some accommodations, this time it's already hard, right? Like, I have a student in our school who's like, Lena, Miss Lena, I love him, Miss Lena, school is torture. And I'm like, of course it's torture. Like, there's so much sensory stuff going on. Remember to go to your places, because we have a pact with him where he can go when. But I never tell him the school isn't torture. School is torture. It's loud, it's obnoxious. He has to do the social thing, that he despises. So I would say that there is a possibility that your autistic 6 to 10-year-old is already kind of managing their sensory dysregulation in spaces. This just kind of is adding to it. So try to like separate those two things, right? There are a lot of children that are autistic and are going to neurotypical schools, or even if they're going to a school where everybody around them knows how to support them, it's still torture with the sensory aspects and all of that aspects, and then this extra piece. So if you let them know that you know that this is an extra piece, that you don't agree with what is happening, but let them tell you what they believe, right? I can see that for some of your children, they already hear that they are a burden, and now the macro is telling them that they're broken. So it's kind of like, I want you, please be frank and concrete, because that's what the autistic brain needs. And it's really hard for us because neurotypical people, we're so subtle, we use so much body language, so just have those frank conversations.
Lena, I would just like to clone you and have you lead all of our schools. Can you just be like the principal of it?
No, I'm having out with my 400.
I'm going to do one more question for the audience, and I'm going to keep moving through our questions. I want to encourage folks, even if you already asked a question, don't feel like you can't, like, this is your time. This is for you. Ask as many questions as you want. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So I just want to note that there have been some really great questions. And if you have additional questions, it's okay to keep putting them in there. So we have Tanya asked, how do you explain? I love this question. I've been waiting. I've been sitting there watching this one, by the way, Tanya. I just want you to know. And I'm like, when am I going to put that one in there? I got to put this one in there. How do you explain to your kids about the ways that the president here in America is behaving? We've always known the office to be respectful and the person in there to be a respectful person. How do you talk to them and get them to understand that there's someone different in there now that may not be behaving in the way that your family models as respectful?
Like that. um Again, always start with the question. So, like, what have you heard about our president? What matches the rules that we've set in your house and what doesn't? But how can he be the president, Mom? Because, there was a group in our community that decided that this was something that they believed in leadership, right? But that's not what we believe, you know. I think that continuing to tell our family, this is not um this is not what we believe leadership is, right? But there is a segment of the community that does, and having that hard conversation, right? Like, and 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 trying not to, and I'm going to push back on everyone, right? Like, trying to kind of have it in a broad way, because if you know if we truly want, a democracy, if we truly want to be inclusive, we have to have that conversation of, like, this is what happened, this is what some people in our community believe in, but we don't. And then just listen to them. Like, a 10-year-old will say the most hysterical things about the president, right? Or they may say, well, I think it's funny, Mom. I think it's hysterical, all the stuff that he says. I mean, he writes everything in caps, or whatever in the world your 10-year-old says, right? And you could say, yeah, but for me, for my lifetime, this is what we believe that a president was. And can you imagine what somebody in another country but here, so just have the conversation. So even in your own question is the answer, right? It's like, it's okay to say that, to and to have the conversation, and and to say, sometimes it happens. And by the way, this happens at school. Sometimes there's a kid that's really popular, but he's really not that nice, or she's really not that nice. And it's important for our children. We don't have to tell them that that's a bad kid. We just have to say, well, do you want to follow them? So it's a life skill. It's a wonderful, like, life lesson for kids, because
Just
you
have that
can
conversation.
you can get power, and it's not only in the precedents. You can get power by uh being cruel, and making others fear you. And by the way, that happens in the elementary jungle and in the middle school and the high school jungle as well. So it's like, you have to wonder, is that somebody you want to follow? Is that somebody that you want to? So it's a nice, like, deep conversation. I can see how a 10 or an 11 year old, one of these Gen Alpha little people, they're hysterical, will push back on you. Well, are you sure that I have to be like what you're saying? Well, I could be president if I act a fool, and then, like, but stay there, right? Don't get mad. Don't get mad. Just stay there. Stay in the debate. Stay in the debate. Yeah.
Lina, I love that example because today I was just talking to my 6-year-old about a child who called her evil, and I've still not understood why that's happening. But we like led with a lot of questions, like, well, why do you think this person said da, 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 da? Like, and I think sometimes we forget that that can work for any situation, right? Like, what do you think about that? Like, what do you think?
Hmm. Yeah.
So thank you for that. I love that. I'm gonna go back to one of our preset questions. And because this one is one that I think will be sitting with a lot of different people. And I think one of the things that I has really struck me about being a parent in general is the continuous cycle of hope and grief. Like, and I don't know if other people feel the same way, but it's something that I sit with a lot. Like, hope and the joy, like when a milestone is met, or seeing your child come into their own, and that simultaneous grief of my baby is not a baby anymore, and that constant nostalgia effect as they grow up. But right now, I think for some parents, there's this added layer of grief and anxiety, for some sitting, it's just sitting there constantly, right? The fear of, what is my child's future going to look like? Can I protect my child? I feel like you've already answered that a little bit, and the answer is probably no. And for example, and I think people worry about like that physical violence too, right? And for example, a refrain that we're hearing often from mothers of daughters is, I never thought my daughter would end up having less rights than me. I mean, it's something that we're hearing constantly. It's something that we see online a lot too.
Yeah.
And these fear and anxiety can also inevitably make emotional regulation and thus parenting a lot harder, right? Where we already had to emotionally regulate as parents on a regular, just because life, like at baseline level, can be challenging. Now we're also having to emotionally regulate this like level of this political turmoil, right? What would you say to parents working through these feelings right now, and how they emotionally regulate in that? Because that's going to be key to being able to, you can't ask your kids questions if you're not emotionally regulated, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't hold them, you
Right.
know. So, okay, so first and foremost, um, I'm 53 years old, so I'm going to tell you that I remember a time where the news was on at 6 and at 11, and maybe we had a paper, and that was it. So, the first thing that I want to challenge all of you to do in this time is to give yourself a quota, an amount of time of when you're checking your threads or your Instagram or your New York Times, or like, I really, if we're talking about parent and self-regulation, um if there's breaking news, you're going to know it. You're going to hear it. Somebody's going to text you. Trust, right? You don't have to be the first one that sees it. But I cannot, especially those of you that have children 10 and younger, and double, triple, quadruple, especially those of you that have children 5 and younger. The constant scrolling and the reading the threads and reading the same exact message from 82 different voices. um right, pick your Pick your sources that you respect, check at certain times, and then put it away. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. And one more time, I know that I'm talking to a bunch of advocates. I know who my audience is. And that's why I'm saying it, right? Because what's healthy is what you just shared about in the beginning, right? The office hours and the how are we going to, like getting into action in the turmoil is the right thing to do. Reading about the turmoil, give yourself 30 minutes a day, an hour a day. Just find like something like the action stuff is great, right? Like I love that you can come on, that you can do the office hours, everything that you guys shared in the beginning, that is healthy, right? But this other piece of just doom scrolling and reading and reposting, and give yourself a break. Okay? That's number one. And I would be saying this about the political turmoil, or you're reading too many things about, potty training, or you're reading too many things about sleep, or you're reading too many things about how to get into high school or college. Like all of these things need like just a break. Now, number two, I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. It is not the parents' job to protect our children from life. It is the parents' job to help the child develop the skills, the habits, the values to be able to manage anything that comes their way. And unfortunately, the example that you gave for our girls, it's very different than how the rest of us grew up. But it's important to think about what are the values, the habits, the skills, the advocacy that we're going to pass on to our children, right? So that they can manage and handle the world today. Is it appropriate? Is it perfectly normal to grieve that our children are growing up in a completely different world than us? 100%. And that's okay, because what I want everybody to concentrate on are what are the skills, what are the values, what are the habits that you're passing on, and what are the environments and the settings and the other adults in your children's lives that are supporting that. um and again, like I said it earlier, is like you don't have to bubble wrap your child. That's actually the worst thing you could do for your child, because then you victimize them,
Mm.
right? And I think the most powerful thing that we as human need is the ability to understand where we have choice, right? So, what can I control? What can't I control? And that's what I mean about doom scrolling, taking action, doing something, being of like service actually has been proven by, positive psychology as like the highest level of joy for the human species, right? So like even first level is like being financially, or like just being safe, like both financially with shelter, with food. But as it keeps getting higher, like true joy and containment and a sense of peace comes from service. So that's the other piece. Now, I told you guys that I have a 20 and a 17-year-old, right? It's parenting is a long goodbye. um So, and if we do it well, they leave, and they become wonderful citizens of the world, right? So the saying is, the days are long, the years are short. So, um, just ground yourself, find your feet, find your hips, or your shoulders over your hips. Take a deep breath and just like notice what they're doing in front of you. And that's another way to like dip out of the turmoil and come back to present, right? Like I love that. Like, where are your feet? Where are your hips? Where are your shoulders? Take a deep breath. Bring yourself to center. And I really encourage that type of like quick body scan, you know, even a minute at a time, 10 minutes at a time, if 30 seconds at a time, because we all need that right now.
Lina, I almost made it. Look at the time. I almost made it, and then that one broke me. Uh, we have, so I think we can almost answer the rest, like many of the questions that are left. And I feel like you've touched on this a little bit, but I'm gonna ask you to kind of go back here for folks a little bit.
Okay.
There's a lot of questions about how do we mitigate fear? How do we mitigate fear of, like, how much information do I give my kids about their safety for an 18-year-old? Then there's also, how do you keep kids from being frightened that being attacked by ICE? A little bit of this idea of like, just how do you keep our children from being afraid in this moment, right?
Right.
And so touch back on that a little bit, because I feel like you've touched on it a little bit, but like just this idea of like, how much can we actually control fear? How much should we be trying to control fear? And what are the tools that we have in our toolbox to make sure that our children feel safe?
Right. Okay. So, remove the goal for them not to feel fear. Remove it. Just grab that and roll it up and throw it away, right? Fear is appropriate, right? Fear, stress, feeling anxious is the natural human response to danger, right? So, the one question about, I have an 18-year-old that is an immigrant and they're afraid. The most loving thing you could say to that human being is, it's okay to feel scared. Fear is letting you know that something it might be dangerous and you have to seek safety, right? So asking someone not to be afraid, or going do, 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 trying to make somebody not be afraid when it's valid, just makes the person that's feeling fear feel crazy and alone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if a child is afraid, if this 18-year-old, it's fair for you to be afraid, you're not wrong, but these are the things that we're doing to take as much precaution as possible. And it's a repeat and remind. With the littles, oh, what if the ICE person comes and bangs in our door? Okay, of course you're afraid, because if somebody banged in our door, we would be really, really scared. But you know what we're gonna do is that you're gonna go with your uncle, and you're gonna go to the room, and then I'm gonna open the door, and I know how to answer because I spoke to the lawyer and we have the answer. So it's like, yes, and yes, you're scared, and that is normal. And this is what we're doing to protect. And it's a repeat and remind, repeat and remind, repeat and remind. It is not a one and done. And I know that I wish I could tell you that there was like one magic thing to do, but it's not. It's like just like repeat the mantra, repeat and remind, repeat and remind. Yes, of course you're scared. That makes sense. And this is what we're doing to stay safe. Because fear is an appropriate emotion. We don't we have to accept it rather than react to it. Fear is not instructions, fear is information. So what is the information that it is giving me, you know? And that's really, really important. What it's and don't lie. Yes, don't lie. Yeah, that lying will create a lack of safety, because now I can't trust you. Now I can't trust what you're telling me.
The Thank you so much, Lina. Uh, and just, I think that reminds me also of like sitting with your children in the dark, right? And I feel like we get so many questions like that because maybe it's hard to sit in the dark. Like it's
It,
hard for ourselves to sit in the dark. And sitting in the dark with our children when we have also seen their joy, I think is hard. So it's always so validating to hear you say that, like the importance of that and just like sitting there with your children and supporting them through that. Because I think that's one of probably the hardest things as parents, right?
yeah. That's I don't know if you guys remember, that's my favorite scene in the Inside Out movie, right? When the Bing Bong, like the friend of the lead in the first Inside Out is like upset and like Joy is like boo and trying to and then sadness just comes and talks to him and then he's just crying and there's like candy that flies out of his eyes. That's what we need, right? Fear is not bad, sadness is not bad, frustration is not bad. It's just information. We don't have to react to it. We just have to see what is the message. And yes, of course you're frustrated. Yes, of course all of you guys are angry that you have to deal with fear with your 7-year-old. Of course you're angry. That's the appropriate human response. And what can we do to be there with this little person, right? Like that's important. Um so yeah, I see one last question.
Yeah, I'm gonna dig into that one. I was thinking about how I could frame that one because I think this one is tacked into something that is an anxiety point for a lot of parents right now. That probably always is, but I think for parents living in the world right now where the politics is not matching their values, like this is particularly challenging, right? So the question is from HG, how do you teach kids to be the change in the world where it feels like we are powerless to change so many things? And I want to add to this question. So like how do we teach this, right? Where like, if when they're already, and I think where there's already like this feeling like we don't have that much control. And then, but layer onto that, I think, is also this idea and this concern of like, how do we make sure that our children become good, like what our definition of a good person is, right? Like I notice every time I go to my local bookstore that there's more books about like raising children, raising good men for the future, like this kind of like
Yeah.
how to not get your child let your child like be bought in by propaganda, right? Like there's this fear that right when they get to that sixth grade point that we will lose that ability to help guide our children to be like good stewards of the world, right? So this idea of like how do you teach your children to be the change in the world that when there's so many things happening and there's this powerlessness, but like also touch a little bit on that concept of like how addressing that fear of like raising a good human being and like a good human being in this moment, right?
Okay, so I'll do the easy question first. So how do we help, the make sure that our children are the change in the world? Um, with small acts. Um, sometimes we get so grandiose. We think that it has to be a big thing, right? But something as simple as watering the plants, something as simple as telling them, the most loving thing you could do for mom today is to help me with the groceries. Can you bring them inside? And framing it that way, right? It's 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 and this is important for this audience tonight, right? You have big advocacy dreams, right? And I love them. I want to encourage all of you to go for that. And but I want you to think of that as like, the big ginormous, Las Vegas buffet, but we could bring back being bringing the change into the tiniest little morsel, right? So it is important to share with ourselves and with our children that something as simple as washing the dishes because your father doesn't want to do it today is changing the world, right? Because it's one tiny, like, the only thing that breaks rock is water, and it does it one drop at a time, right? The Grand Canyon is like years and years and years and years and years and years and years of water, being in the system, right? So that's important. Now, this other idea of how do we make sure that we're raising kind, compassionate, empathic children? Well, first they have to experience it, right? They have to experience it from their primary caregivers. They have to experience it from the adults around them. So the first 10 years, they need adults giving them what we hope they will give in the future. I absolutely, in like at the school, the second floor, it's a 4-story building, and the second floor is the preschool. I love looking at the pre-K2 classroom and seeing them take care of the baby dolls, because I see how that 2-year-old is being taken care of. I see the parents in how they're caring for that baby, right? Yes, sometimes they hit the baby. It's fine. Don't worry. I know you're not hitting any babies, but like, first, so if are you kind, are you compassionate, are you empathic with them? Because I have to experience it before I can be it, right? And then it's, what books are you reading together? What shows are you watching together? What conversations are you having? How often are you talking about the values in your family? And then just continue. But your relationship and how you respond to your child directly relates to how they will relate to others. So no pressure, right? Like, that's the hardest piece. It's like, if I always teach you, if I always treat you with love, if I always treat you with respect, when I mess up and I scream at you because I'm a human being and I just read something ridiculous and then you came at me and I just snapped, did I turn around and say, you know what, you didn't deserve me speaking to you that way, I was really frustrated and then I misused my words? That's how we create that child. And then when something online doesn't act that way, or when another human being in their world doesn't act that way and it just doesn't look familiar, it won't be attractive, because the brain is an association machine, right? And it takes past experiences and matches it to what could possibly be happening right now, because it likes to predict and associate past to present. So if presently somebody is screaming and being rude to them and they don't apologize, they're going to be like, that's weird, and they're not going to be attracted to it.
Lina, this has been brilliant. We have no more time for any more questions. And just, I want to thank Lina so much for being here and for sitting in this space with us tonight. Uh, if folks would love to hear from Lina again, please let us know. I'm always down to have Lina as many times as she'll let me. I had this grand design of having a wrap up of the top learnings, and I find that I'm struggling because I feel like the conversation was so rich. But I think some of the things to really keep in mind for folks is this idea that, like, it's okay to sit in the dark with your child, like, and that it's actually the right thing to do, right? Is to sit in the dark with them, to comfort your child, and to model that behavior of how is it that we comfort and how is it that we deal with this moment. Modeling the behavior, right? If your children see you out in the community trying to make a difference, bringing them when you feel like it's safe to make a difference, even those small acts, right? To Lena's point of the small acts, you're modeling the behavior for them. We talked also a lot about not trying to erase fear or mitigate fear, either at the really early beginning when we started talking about the ICE raids, all the way up to like the recent just question around fear in general. But really providing your kiddo with the tools to have safety with you and to feel safe with you. And what does recognizing the fear or recognizing whatever the hard feeling is, be that sadness, fear, or frustration, and then figuring out and then giving the plan and like, here's what we're doing, here's what you can do, right? And then I feel like there was so much in there, but those are the ones I'm going to stick with the most because I feel like those were like the pattern ones. Do you agree, Lina?
Yes, and always starting with a question.
Always starting with a question.
What do you know? Or tell me what you think. Because then they tell you, and then you don't end up sharing more than you should.
Thank you. That was a really important one. And so I just want to, I have a couple of like, if you don't leave us yet, I have a couple of things just to preview the next meeting for you all. But I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge all the amazing parents and what we're having to do in this moment. Many of us, this was not in our bingo card for like how we thought we would be parenting our children. And so just deep recognition and amazing and just love for everyone here doing this hard work. And I saw some teachers in the chat as well, and our teachers who are doing that difficult work as well, and caregivers in general. So thank you for what you do. I just want to give a reminder, the office hours that we have available. If we provide lots of action opportunities and ideas through the dispatch every month. Big thank you to folks on our team who build that out. And in our meetings, we also occasionally talk about different action opportunities. If you were here for our mutual aid conversation, for example, if you want to think about how you do that in your community and build that out with somebody, you know, we're here. Let us know. Join our office hours. Our next meeting, just to preview that, is going to be in October. That's our last meeting of the year, because we understand that at the end, our meetings are usually at the end of the month. We know that in November and December, we will lose people to the holidays. And hopefully, like in taking that time and not doom scrolling every day and spending more time with your family and spending more time with your friends and your children. And so that meeting is actually going to be our blockbuster greatest hits. We're going to talk about like what we've learned together. We're going to review some of what we've done in the year, and we're going to be asking you, you know, this entire program has been shaped by all of you and what you've been interested in learning about by the Moms Next Door community. So we're going to be checking in with all of you and polling you and just having that conversation. And make sure you save the date using the link in the chat and using the materials in the chat to let us know what you want to learn next year, what you want us to cover as you do your rest and refresh for the end of the year. We want to hear from you. And so please join the next meeting, if nothing else, to just tell us what you want to learn and what you want us to be building out for this content next year. Do you want to see Lina again? Okay, that's the chance to tell us. So do you want to see Akiko again? Like, that's the chance to tell us. So make sure that you come and you let us know what you want to hear. If you missed the September dispatch, if you're not signed up yet, you can sign up for Moms Next Door updates using the links in the chat. And you can also get the dispatch on our blog. We post the dispatch every month on the blog as well. So for whatever reason you lose that email, deleted accidentally, you really want to go back to it, just know that you can always go to the Moms Rising blog. And I'll name that we have the dates all ready for January, February, and March. So if you want to just save, you're like ready and you want to save the date. It's at this time always, and it's Tuesdays. And so January 27th, February 17th, and March 31st are going to be the dates for January, February, and March. So I'll say those again: Tuesday, January 17th, February 17th. No, sorry, January 27th. I can read numbers. January 27th, February 17th, and March 31st, if you want to save those dates. And I will wrap this up by just saying thank you, everybody, again, for your time. Thank you for raising beautiful humans. Thank you for knowing beautiful little humans, teaching beautiful little humans. And we will see you in October. And again, Lina, thank you so much for your time and for all that you do always. Good night.